Hello, everyone. I'm Leonid. I'm a CTO and co-founder of a company called StackPulse. StackPulse offers an enterprise-grade service for software development teams. And in this short presentation, I will share my experience, our experience as an organization, in a recent journey to reorganize, or actually disorganize our SRE organization as a result of new constraints that we've been handled due to work from home reality as a result of COVID-19 outbreak. What I'll be talking about is first and foremost how this changed. And we were pretty much headquarters-based organization. We are headquartered in Portland, Oregon, with R&D office in Tel Aviv and additional office in New York. So how did this thing even impact our ability to operationalize our service, what we did about it, what kind of goals we set to ourselves, and how did we go about achieving them. Most important, of course, are the lessons we learned along the way and how we gradually improved here. And if we'll have some time, I'll be happy to leave everyone here on the call with some action items, food for thoughts that might be relevant in case your organization is or will be undergoing a similar transformation sometime. So, first of all, we are a growing organization that has adopted agile software delivery lifecycle culture to a very significant extent. We use this thing to both deliver additional value to our customers as well as foster innovation across our R&D teams. This is a great, in our humble opinion, thing. It has tremendously increased the velocity of how we can deliver value to our customers. But as the organization grows, it has also started fragmenting the knowledge because teams are focusing mostly on their domains of expertise, having less and less system-wide knowledge and understanding, especially again, as we grow, onboard new engineers and so on. Our original approach to hopefully getting the best of both worlds and bridging this was to define roles such as site reliability engineers, both in the teams and sort of like cross-organizational ones, introduce more and more collaboration tools for knowledge management, for communications, in general, adopt as much shift-left tooling as possible for pretty much everything, automated testing on various layers, building, deployment, monitoring, and so on and so forth. We felt we were in a pretty good shape before the unfortunate outbreak of COVID-19 has forced us to work from home for long periods of time. This is when we realized that the status quo we were so proud of and worked diligently on achieving before, unfortunately did not serve us well enough in this new situation. And we embarked on a new journey. So what did we learn, by the way? First, we saw that we were not alone in the universe being affected by this change in organizational working style. A survey released just this September by PagerDuty, the company handling on-call management, scheduling, etc. So 62% of their, I think, over 700 responding organizations have reported that they spend 10 plus additional hours a week on handling incidents since the beginning of the COVID outbreak. Please note that it's not saying that explicitly they have more incidents, although this may be a contributing factor. Also, it doesn't explicitly say that it takes more time to resolve the incidents, right? But it also may be a contributing factor. What is what has caught my personal attention about this particular survey is that this metric, how many hours you're spending a week resolving on incidents or investigating, etc., is actually a very reliable one, right? Because PagerDuty and companies like PagerDuty, they don't get paid according to the amount of time you spend investigating your incidents, right? So there's no incentive whatsoever to emphasize this finding unless it is absolutely 100% accurate. So it really started our curiosity along with additional findings in this survey. Another slightly earlier survey has shown, and again, not very surprisingly, that an overwhelming amount of site reliability engineering owners, be it full-time SREs or maybe software engineers or DevOps engineers that share the responsibility, spends over half of their time on the defense rather than on the offense, meaning doing reactive things, helping operations run smoothly, rather than doing proactive things, improving architecture, improving operational tooling, etc., etc. This is a very important piece. I think it was true to a significant extent before COVID as well, but combined with the finding from the PagerDuty survey, I think the two show that there has been a deterioration in amount of times we are required to work on making sure that our services run rather than providing better value to our customers. And it's not that we were happy to see that we're not alone in this challenge. It did give us more motivation, right, to understand that there is an explicit issue here and that we need to tackle it. We need to change the way we operate in order to improve and keep on improving under this new reality. So we first and foremost looked inside, right, and tried to identify what is the root for our biggest challenges, right? What are the things that hurt us the most? First and foremost, we understood that as a growing organization, one of the biggest challenges we'll have working remotely is with training and onboarding team members, which is a constant process in our team. It used to be a constant process as well, heavily rooted in the fact that these new team members were mixed within our offices with experienced people, had a very well-defined process where they started participating in operational aspects, first as shadowing more experienced team members, then the roles would reverse and it would be the more experienced team members shadowing the person being ramped up. And unfortunately, it became much more difficult. Second of all is that, and again, it may be good news, but they create a challenge. So dealing with increased noise in our service, right? We don't only grow as an organization, we also grow as a service provider, meaning more and more organizations consume our service, introducing new scale challenges, introducing new functional challenges. And again, we really think that this is the right thing, right? That's how the process should be, but we should be investing much more in proactive reliability and resilience engineering in order to prevent the increase in the noise. For us, what we managed to identify beyond any reasonable doubt, that the new challenges that we start seeing in this COVID-driven world was the fact that the amount of data flow in the informal channels has been explicitly reduced. Now, this thing pretty much depends on the organizational culture. Some organizations, such as GitLab or HashiCorp, were established for the WFH full remoting sort of like modus operandi from the get-go. You can see an excellent blog, or maybe even a series of blogs from Mitchell Hashimoto on this very subject, how a culture of building such an organization is fostered, even from the recruiting of the relevant people, setting the relevant expectations, etc. Well, for us, it was different. We very much rely on tightly knit teams, camaraderie among the people, and informal ties. The fact that our office is even designed to allow and optimize for informal communication flow so far has been a huge asset to us. And suddenly we lost it. And for us, it was a root of, well, maybe not all evil, but a lot of evil. So what did disorganizing the SRE organization mean for us? And, of course, when we started this journey with something that seemed to us as completely disorganizing the structure that we built, of course, ended up as being reorganizing it, albeit for new constraints. For us, the idea was mainly this. We felt that in order to deliver and grow and improve in this new world, we would first and foremost need to democratize the responsibility, right, for reliability of our operations to all engineers and, of course, their managers, right? The idea where, the SRE or the DevOps people would be sort of like tier one, getting most of the heat, and then they will distribute certain incidents to experts, just could not work in such a reality. By the way, that's not the way we wanted to work to begin with, but certainly this has expedited our desire to move in this direction. Now, what has to be, absolutely has to be a complete component to this democratization is ensuring that people who are participating in this distributed process are fully empowered to take actions and actually resolve issues autonomously. Now, there's an interesting sort of like a thin gray line there. They need both to be empowered, i.e. have all the data, all the information, all the tools, and so on, as well as they need to feel empowered to take this action. Because if you are in the middle of the night, you're handling critical incidents, you are alone, you need to have confidence, whether you are a new team member that just started, so like leading incident resolutions, or you may be an expert, but not necessarily in the field where the particular incident occurred. Maybe jumping ahead, but I'll tell you that this process allowed us not only to design a more efficient site reliability engineering process for the given constraints of COVID, actually looking back, we have improved our reliability regardless of the constraints. And we think that that is probably the way we'll continue working always, regardless to whether we ever change back from work from home, right? So this is a very important learning for us. We did not expect it to be, right? We literally embarked on the journey to build something for the constraints, ended up having something that is much better. So how do we go about democratizing the responsibility for site reliability engineering across all of our teams? Our first order of business was to start treating reliability like a feature and sort of like an inseparable component of each and every R&D task. This is something that amended our definition of done for developers, right? So you don't just build the whatever business logic you would like to roll out. You don't just build the automated tests for it. You don't just amend your deployment, configuration, etc. But you also invest explicit thought, engineering, review in how do you operationalize it, which means monitor it and respond when the monitoring actually alerts on something that is not according to the expectations. In order to do that, we needed to train our developers and development leads on these new disciplines, right? They became the part of their new norm, but originally they weren't sort of like first-class citizens in this norm to the same extent. So things like monitoring, alerting, methodologies around it, observability, right? How to allow people to see exact state of the production environment without actually accessing it directly. What are error budgets and why they are important, and how to define them correctly, and how to monitor their exhaustion? What are service level objectives and what are not? By the way, service level objectives also an important part. So we really explicitly embarked on a journey where we told our people, hey guys, your job definition is now being extended with these new disciplines. And we explicitly made sure that the understanding of these disciplines is uniform across all our teams so that we can sort of like expect consistent action from people when they take it. By the way, when we said that we democratized on-call operations to all developers, it included their leadership as well. Because again, as a first tier, maybe even second tier manager that started being responsible for these additional disciplines that your engineers are executing, you have to be, you have to have personal experience, at least to a certain extent, right? You don't have to be operations guru, but you have to understand the inner workings of these processes in order to be able to develop your people, mentor your people, manage your people in these departments. When we embarked on, empowering people for being autonomous, and while doing that, still being very much consistent across the organization, first, it was very important for us to sort of like understand why we're doing it. And the thing is this, you see, it is very important when you're sitting alone to feel that you are empowered and that you have all the relevant tools to take action. Now, there is a fundamental difference. When I'm in a room with a couple of additional colleagues and I'm not 100% confident about something, just one look and I see that one of my colleagues is currently looking up from their screen. Hey, would you mind looking at this thing for a second? Because, it's sensitive and I'm not entirely sure. That's easy, right? And if one person happens to be busy at this time, I'll be able to pull additional people in. It's very normal when you work as a team to actually do such things. People expect it to an extent. Unfortunately, it is not so when, again, these people are not physically with you in the room. It's something that is sometimes really causing people not to take the most efficient decisions, right? Being able to Slack and Zoom people is a great thing, but let's not confuse it. It's not the same bandwidth of communications. You have no idea whether the people are currently busy or not, whether when they are reacting, they are fully focused on what you're asking them, or they're in the middle of gazillion other tasks. For instance, consider a story that we heard from one of our early adopters. An experienced engineer, but new to the organization, was carrying out one of their first shifts as a lead and not a shadow. And they had a significant outage at 5 a.m. in the morning. And that person had to wake up and involve 3 colleagues, different colleagues, because the outage was relatively complex. For most of these 3 colleagues, this would be the first time they ever talk to this person. Now, imagine how scarred emotionally, right? And I'm not exaggerating, this person could be, right? It's their first month or 2 months in the organization. They haven't yet proven their worth. And here they are waking people up in not the middle of the night, but still very early in the morning with something that's, maybe is a good idea, maybe is not that good an idea, but they just don't know any better. And that is a very difficult experience to have. And we felt that we need to build the culture and the tooling so that people feel empowered to act on their own, and when needed, sure, empowered to access, right, the team, but still on a factual basis. And when I say on a factual basis, right, that's that bandwidth of communications that I'm bringing in here, right? The idea is that when I'm remotely collaborating, texting, video screening, etc., it's much more about tasks, facts, data, missing data, and findings, and it's much less about how comfortable do I feel to approach this particular team member, how glad they are to help me out, or is this particular timing completely uncomfortable for them, right? This is important. So how do we go about it? We decided that the right way is to formalize and take every workflow that we see as taking place in process of operations of our service, and build very clear playbooks for it. We literally adopted this slogan when we said we never want to do the same thing manually twice. As a matter of fact, some of them we didn't want to do manually even once. Not only we decided to turn it into playbooks, we decided that these playbooks should not be just a text somewhere in, wiki portal, having relatively vague definitions. Imagine how many times you could have seen, okay, go into this log and see if you have suspicious errors, or check out this graph of something and see if it has a unexpectedly suspicious to whom, unexpected to whom, right? We decided that if we really want to empower people, they need to get something that is not requiring any tribal knowledge, any context, etc. If you get a tool that allows you to troubleshoot certain issue, diagnose certain issue, maybe remediate certain problem, the tool expressed as code should be deterministic. It should expect certain arguments, and then it should act, and then it should succeed. And these things should be available as modules rather than as monolithic process code blocks, right? And then process could consist of a number of modules, and that's very important. We wanted the language of all these and the format of how we build them, document them, test them, deploy them to be 100% synchronized across all organization. Very, very important, again, contributing to that confidence to use it. confident in its ability to actually perform consistently, right, across various environments. And we educated the team with respect to, first of all, our goals here, and with respect to the importance of building and using these coded blocks for operations. For us, for instance, it looked like this. So we took declarative playbooks workflows, expressed them in a domain-specific YAML-based language. We ended up encapsulating each step in the process via Docker containers so that they could be run in different environments and sort of like act consistently. As long as you provide valid arguments to this procedural step, it will provide an expected output. We even classified different steps that we take in the workflows of incident response, incident investigation, into the following sort of like 4 parts, starting with enrichment, right? So we have received a signal and alerts, but we still need to fill in additional information about the context, about the environment, to understand implications, maybe technical implications, right? What exactly is the problem in the database cluster, which of the nodes are affected while others that weren't, and so on and so forth. Or maybe on the business flows, right? If we're having latency in a certain environment, which customer accounts, we are a multi-tenant service, for example, so which accounts are involved? Are some of the accounts having significantly more instances of the problem than others, et cetera, et cetera? So all that. Definitely based on this collected data, we then codify triage, either ruling out things that could have contributed to the problem, but are not contributing in the particular case that we're handling, or as well as sort of like zooming in, focusing on suspicious signals and analyzing them. Again, the way knowledgeable engineer would do, and the way not sufficiently knowledgeable engineer would not be able to do, but now with this tool they could. Even the communication, right? Think about not necessarily very exciting and challenging task of, depending on the incident impact, depending on its severity and nature, which role players in the organization should be notified, with which frequency, when will the customers need to be notified about the potential impact, et cetera, et cetera. These things, right, they have to be uniform across all incident managers, across all the organization. And the way we made sure that it is so is we codified them as well, including opening war rooms, updating tickets, updating incident notifications, involving field people in communication with customers where necessary, et cetera, right? That's the beauty of building declarative flows. When you're handling incidents, your focus should be 100% on the problem at hand, not on, wait a second, haven't I forgot to notify some? Whoa, do we need to invoke here procedure A or procedure B? Because I'm not quite sure. This thing is very important. And of course, last but definitely not least, and very sensitive, right? Our goal is to remediate the production environment, bring it into operation as quickly as possible. These are sensitive steps. Usually people sort of like hesitate the most when taking them. And when you were given encapsulated steps with declarative sort of like processes, we saw a much better adoption. This is, for example, one such playbook, loading and enriching data about Redis. So we have Redis cluster, it has high latency. So let's see the resources, let's see the configuration changes, let's see the amount of connections and queries per second, maybe long queries, maybe big keys, maybe cluster replication log, things like that, that somebody knowledgeable around operating Redis cluster would have known how to pull upon needs. And now everybody, no matter how knowledgeable or not they are, they would get it whenever they diagnose anything related to that cluster. So in our first month, we started mapping and developing these playbooks, and we had this work also spread around our teams, right, where people have better knowledge, bigger expertise around particular elements of our system. We defined communication etiquette with respect to different incidents, their impact, their severity, and actually codified that as well in our communication playbooks. We defined calendaric reviews, not of the incidents, right? The retrospectives or postmortems, the way we used to call them in the past, they still happened. But these meetings were about looking at how we are progressing with automating, distributing, and empowering our site reliability engineering operations. Periodically, we started treating this journey as if it would have been a software development life cycle in its own right. And you know what? Actually, to many aspects, it was exactly such. So we continued when, after the first month, we started having a certain, I don't know, critical mass or close to critical mass of issues already built on reusable playbook modules, so that we could do more and more and more different flows based on these. So there, the analysis there and our ability to do some data-driven understanding of what we were still missing, where we were more efficient, and so on, it really sort of like kicked in. So what did we learn throughout these 3-4 first months? Surprisingly enough, our biggest sort of like lessons learned or gaps between how we expected the things to go versus how they really went were not around technology, but actually around the human part of the process. And this is sort of like something that is very important for me to share. Maybe, I don't know, maybe we were lucky, or our engineers did a good choice, did a good job sort of like choosing what tech stack we needed to operate this, but that part actually worked. The challenges we had with humans adapting to the new processes could be broken down roughly to like 4 categories. One would be around accepting the new normal, right? The fact that your job definition has been extended. The second part was learning how different individuals would react to this, and how the procedures, messages, culture, right, has to be adapted to their individual needs. Speaking about the culture, everybody knows here a sentence that says culture builds its strategy for breakfast, and it was right in this case as well. Culture ate strategy for breakfast in this area as well, and played a very critical part in our ability to actually succeed in this process. We explicitly monitored and improved this ability of each and every participant to terminate various loops locally, right? Make these autonomous decisions in a consistent manner. So, first and foremost, the best thing in at least our experience, if you want somebody to accept the new normal, is try to avoid acting like nothing has changed, right? This denial stage, sort of like the first one in stages of grief, it really didn't do good to us. I mean, we tried, don't get me wrong, we tried like opening a Slack and Zoom room, for instance, and having all developers in a single team be in this Zoom room, and then somebody joined whenever they needed to ask them something. It felt really cool in the first couple of days. Like, people said, oh, it's almost like if we were sitting in the same office, how cool, they would eat lunch together. Within a couple of days, it sort of like turned into gimmick, and then nuisance, and then people starting turning off microphones and cameras, hopping off these Zoom rooms, and it just became annoying. It increased people's sort of like alert fatigue, and brought the responsiveness down rather than up. So lesson number 1, at least for us, it just didn't work. You need to, there's a new normal. It requires new tools, new processes, new everything, not something that would try to make people feel like nothing changed. It wouldn't surprise you, and it didn't surprise us, although maybe the extent of it did a bit, that the different people have different preferences. And when they're located not in the office, but actually work within their home offices, etc., sometimes their preferences for interruption, communications may change. And we had to, that's the part of the work that team leaders mainly carried out, to figure out with each and every individual, what is their new sort of like new status quo, new balance. Does this person, I mean, can we approach them on Slack over phone if needed, and pull them in, or does this person require more sort of like heads up, and then maybe in 10 minutes, or maybe specific like hours when they explicitly know that they are being on duty, versus other hours where they can sort of focus very deeply on what they're doing. And it was different. I mean, people had a certain balance in this aspect when they worked from the office, and it changed for them. And we couldn't always predict, knowing an individual and the way they act in the office, how that would turn out being when the same individual is working from home, which is very curious. We ended up, and I think it contributed a lot, explicitly talking with our people that these new realities force us to build a new organizational culture. We are an organization that is immensely proud of its culture, of its atmosphere. We have very strong professional engineers who immensely enjoy their day-to-day job thanks to this culture, and not only to professional challenges or compensation or other aspects of work. And setting this as a clear expectation for everybody. It's like, people, we need to amend our corporate culture for this new reality. We were very open with respect to sharing the challenges that we see, hearing from people whether they also see it from their angle or they see things differently. As we were already mentioned, it, an organization heavily built on camaraderie, informal communications. We had to work explicitly on building opportunities for creating such informal communications or informal interactions between different people. And it wasn't easy to do it in a way that would look natural and not, pardon me, a bit lame and artificial. That's where our people ops have invested quite a lot of thought and efforts. And of course, the cornerstone of this all, how do we allow people to actually take action by themselves so that this distributed process is efficient? We had to redivide certain responsibilities, right, that made it possible. I already mentioned the big bulk of our work was actually formalizing processes into playbooks, into usable playbooks, usable confidence. These same playbooks, by the way, didn't have to be 100% automated. Sometimes they would work in as steps in them for eyes verification over Slack with approval, and so on and so forth. And just as any sort of like agile development lifecycle, we had to meticulously visualize what's going on with our process, measure its performance, periodically share it with the team, celebrate the improvements, analyze, and sort of like continuously work on things that were not acting properly yet. So 6 months into our journey, I would be happy to report that our root cause analysis and enrichment for all our incidents, both the common and sort of like mundane ones, and sometimes these happen, although our goal is for them never to happen, but reality sometimes surprises us, and also not very common ones. Over 60% of all of it is now automated in a completely uniform fashion, delivering all this information to whoever's on call for the particular issue. We reduced our mean time to resolve by 35%. Actually, now we reduced it even more. So this is an important piece, right? That's a significant amount of hours. Remember the 10 plus additional hours from the PagerDuty survey. So we reduced this thing. We found out that it was very effective for us to implement these playbooks, and we have now quite a lot of them handling different pieces of the incident resolution puzzle, from enrichment, triage, communication, remediation, even opening like follow-up tasks in Jira, and taking other postmortem things. And today, over half of the members of this new, bigger distributed teams, including the newly ramped up ones, have led incident response for tangible, relevant incidents. And of course, our goal is to have almost all of the teams, team members, being in this position where they have confidence and the experience to become the leaders. Wow, it feels like I've told our story, something that took a lot of my personal attention and involvement in this past 6 months. If I have to leave you with food for thought, like things that, I don't know, I would focus on if I did it all over again. In fact, things that I'm focusing on now doing it. One thing that is critical is being open and being extremely explicit that you are embarking on a new journey. People, basic psychology, usually are not thrilled with a change. Sometimes people would not necessarily understand why the change would be required because they don't necessarily have the full picture. So being open, being explicit, setting a goal, telling people, guys, things will change. When they do, by the way, our goal is that you become happier, you become more efficient, you have more time to do creative engineering job, etc., right? That's why we are changing, because if we don't, according to statistics, according to our own experience, things will change to the worse, and we don't want to do that. It is very important not to lead this process as a top-down one. So for us, what made it work really well is that we identified individuals that were passionate about this. Engineering leads, devs, team leads, and we involved them heavily in managing this process. That was very, very important. The choice of technology, that one that worked pretty well for us, it wasn't made by me. That's an important piece. We took some of these individuals and we empowered them to actually drive the choice of technology. It may not surprise you that technologists love solving problems with tools much more than they would solving them with like manual processes and then automating meticulously these processes. Step one, do this. Step two, right? Technologists are, at the end of the day, always looking to see if a problem at hand can be solved with technology. And in this case, of course, it could. And I think it contributed a lot to our success. Also, it was extremely important for us not to assume that people would tell us very conveniently how they feel or what they sense with respect to this process, right? Unfortunately, there is no feelings dog or sensitivity Prometheus. And we realized that confidence in these soft metrics would be critical for our process. So we, our people ops, and as well as our managers, we're constantly aware of the fact that there may be something here in the room that requires explicit monitoring, explicit validation, talking to people and asking questions, because we did not count on people always coming ahead and proactively surfacing these as I think it should be. So I think these four, for us, played a key role, along with the whole process that I just described, in our success. Well, if there is time for questions, I'll be happy to take some. If not, please feel free to reach out to me. I've invested a lot of, efforts in this, and if you feel that things that I brought up could be relevant to you, it would be my honor and my pleasure to help your organization out. Thank you very much for attending this session.